He does most of the stage artwork and the conceptual stuff, and he's a graph writing from old days. And
On August 27, 1990, the music world fractured when blues legend Stevie Ray Vaughan was tragically killed in a helicopter crash right after performing with Eric Clapton. For decades, the haunting weight of that night has lingered, but now, 36 years later, Clapton has finally broken his silence to share a deeply personal, shocking truth about the tragedy. Why did it take Clapton nearly 4 decades to finally reveal what really happened that fateful night? Join us as we uncover Clapton's emotional confession and the truth behind his long silence. The Blues Refuge, escaping the loneliness of a wartime childhood through sound. The devastating loss of Stevie Ray Vaughan on that foggy night in 1990 fractured the music world forever, leaving Eric Clapton to carry a heavy, silent grief for 36 years. While the world saw two brothers in arms trading legendary guitar riffs on stage just hours before the helicopter crash, few knew the deep, hidden trauma Clapton tucked away, secrets about the aftermath that are only now coming to light. But long before that earth-shattering tragedy, and long before he became a guitar god capable of surviving such immense heartbreak, Clapton was just a normal kid growing up in England, completely unaware of the extraordinary and turbulent life that awaited him. Born in Surrey in 1945, his life was complicated from the very start. His mother was just 16, and his father, a Canadian soldier, shipped out to war before he was even born. Because of this, young Eric grew up in a web of family secrets, genuinely believing his grandparents were his mom and dad, and that his actual mother was just his older sister. It was a confusing household, and things only got lonelier when his mother eventually married another soldier and moved to Germany, leaving Eric behind to be raised by his grandparents. As a quiet boy looking for an escape, music became his ultimate refuge. For his 13th birthday, he unwrapped a cheap German-made acoustic guitar, but the steel strings were so stiff and painful to press down that he quickly got frustrated and tossed it aside. Thankfully, the itch returned 2 years later, and this time he couldn't put it down. He fell head over heels for the raw emotion of American blues music, spending endless hours in his bedroom hunched over a portable tape recorder. He would play along to old records, tape his own sessions, and listen to them repeatedly until his fingers perfectly matched the chords of his heroes. This obsession with the guitar quickly took over his entire life, completely sidelining his education. By 1961, he managed to get into art college, but he spent so much time strumming chords instead of painting canvases that the school expelled him by the end of the year. But Eric didn't care. His playing was already so advanced that people were starting to stop and stare. At just 16, he took his talents to the streets, busking for spare change around London and teaming up with local blues lovers to play in cozy neighborhood pubs. By the time he turned 17, he officially leaped into the music scene by joining his very first rhythm and blues band, the Roosters. It was a short, legendary 8-month stint that ignited his career, setting him on a path toward global stardom, immense fame, and the eventual, heartbreaking friendship with Stevie Ray Vaughan that would change him forever. The Blues Purist: Why Clapton Walked Away from the Yardbirds and Pop Stardom. The skyrocketing rise of Eric Clapton's career seemed completely unstoppable. But beneath the roaring applause and the flashing lights, a dark, heavy shadow was slowly creeping in, a foreshadowing of the profound personal tragedies and deep isolation that would eventually culminate decades later on that heartbreaking night with Stevie Ray Vaughan. By late 1963, Young Eric was already a hot commodity on the local pub scene, so it was no surprise when a rising band called the Yardbirds begged him to join. Together, they started pumping out radio hits like "Good Morning Little Schoolgirl." But the sweet taste of commercial pop music quickly turned sour for a purist like Clapton, who just wanted to play raw, authentic blues. Frustrated, he walked away from the group in 1965, unwittingly leaving the door wide open for two other kids named Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck to step in and take his place, both of whom would also grow up to become absolute guitar legends. After walking away from the pop charts, Clapton doubled down on his true passion by joining John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers. It proved to be a historic move, resulting in an album so legendary it cemented him as a master of his craft. He blew minds with his blistering solos on tracks like "What Did I Say?" And his playing was so otherworldly that fans started treating him less like a musician and more like a prophet. In fact, a passionate fan spray-painted the words "Clapton is God" on a London subway wall, a flattering nickname that stuck with him forever. Yet, true to his restless spirit, he packed his bags once again, teaming up with a powerhouse drummer named Ginger Baker and a brilliant bassist named Jack Bruce to form the rock trio, Cream. With Cream, Clapton didn't just play the blues, he completely reinvented them, blowing the roof off venues with heavy psychedelic anthems like "Sunshine of Your Love." They dropped hit album after hit album, conquered America, and achieved massive international superstardom. But the bright lights couldn't hide the massive egos clashing behind the scenes. After a couple of fiery farewell shows in London, Cream burned out and broke up, forcing Clapton to start all over again. He quickly threw together a new supergroup called Blind Faith, but that project crashed and burned after just one album and a truly disastrous American tour. By 1970, a deeply lonely Clapton poured his fractured soul into a brand new band called Derek and the Dominoes, recording a masterpiece called Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. The entire record was a desperate, unrequited love letter to Pattie Boyd, who happened to be married to his close friend, George Harrison of the Beatles. Though the album is now widely considered one of the greatest rock records ever made, it initially flopped hard at the cash register. Devastated by the commercial failure and utterly brokenhearted over a love he couldn't have, Clapton spiraled into a dark, reclusive depression, disappearing from the world into a brutal 3-year battle with heroin addiction, proving that even a guitar god wasn't immune to life's crushing pain. From floor-bound stupor to sober resolve, the brutal reality of Clapton's addiction. The wild, unpredictable ride of rock superstardom had already pushed Eric Clapton to the absolute brink. But as the 1980s rolled in, an even darker storm was gathering on the horizon, a series of heartbreaking losses and personal demons that would test his survival like never before. Back in the swinging 60s, British fans had literally worshipped him, famously painting graffiti on subway walls declaring him to be God. Yet, just 20 years later, during a stadium performance in Australia, that very same guitar icon was flat on his back, blindly strumming his guitar from the floor. It wasn't a cool, choreographed stage stunt. He was simply too incredibly drunk to stand on his own 2 feet. His life had become an endless, exhausting cycle of substance abuse, burning through massive fortunes to fuel a severe heroin addiction before switching to alcohol to fill the empty void. He was spending a fortune every single week just to stay high, running himself completely ragged both physically and financially. The low point came when his body simply began to give out on him. During one terrifying incident, he had to be rushed to a hospital in Minnesota while actively spitting up blood from multiple bleeding stomach ulcers, a grim sign that his insides were literally churning to pieces from drinking 3 entire bottles of brandy a day while swallowing handfuls of heavy painkillers. He was standing on the absolute edge of death, yet he was so heavily medicated that he couldn't even remember the flight that saved his life. In his darker moments, the only reason he didn't end it all right then and there was a brutally honest, twisted thought. He realized that if he were dead, he wouldn't be able to drink anymore. Alcohol had become his entire reason for living, and his manager had to keep him on a long, incredibly dangerous leash, just hoping he would eventually see sense. When he finally checked into a treatment center in 1987, he was absolutely terrified. He genuinely believed that if he dried out and got clean, his musical creativity would completely vanish, thinking he needed the chaotic buzz of chemicals just to write a decent song. But the arrival of his beautiful newborn son, Connor, changed everything, giving him a powerful reason to fight through the agonizing withdrawal. He desperately wanted to be a real, present father, not an addict passing out on the floor. He leaned heavily into his recovery, even spending 6 years working entirely for free as an unpaid part-time counselor at a London clinic, eagerly passing on the hard lessons he had learned to help other struggling souls find their way out of the darkness. For a brief moment, it seemed like the clouds had finally cleared, and life was beautiful again. But a parent's ultimate nightmare was lurking just around the corner. In March of 1991, just a year after losing Stevie Ray Vaughan, absolute tragedy struck when 4.5-year-old Connor accidentally fell from the window of a 49th floor New York apartment where he lived with his mother. It was the kind of earth-shattering, unimaginable horror that would drive even the most sober person straight back to the bottle. Yet, instead of drowning his agonizing sorrow in brandy, Clapton stayed strong, leaning heavily on his recovery support group and a profound belief in a higher power to navigate the blinding grief. Out of that deep, dark valley of pain, he channeled his broken heart into music, writing a deeply moving, legendary song about finding peace beyond the heavenly gates where there are no more tears. Rather than letting the crushing weight of loss break his sobriety, he chose to transform his personal tragedies into a lifelong mission of healing. By the late 90s, he opened up a wonderful addiction clinic on the tropical island of Antigua, specifically designed to provide free, life-saving treatment to the local poor population who had nowhere else to turn. He realized that the best way to conquer a black, painful chapter in your life is to immediately flip the page and fill the blank space with something beautiful and selfless. Today, after decades of continuous sobriety, he openly acknowledges that he is an addict who spent a lifetime trying to find the meaning of existence in the bottom of a bottle. But he doesn't live with heavy regrets anymore. He knows that every painful step, every overdose, and every heartbreaking loss shaped him into the resilient man he is today. Though he admits his music changed forever after he put down the drugs, he now views his guitar not as a tool for chaotic rock star indulgence, but as a sacred instrument meant to heal his own deep wounds and soothe the souls of everyone listening. But long before he could use his music to heal, Eric Clapton's private life was a dizzying merry-go-round of hidden betrayals and secret children that would quietly lay the groundwork for his eventual, heartbreaking collapse. The Breaking Point: How Infidelity and Loss Shattered a Marriage. The chaotic, high-stakes world of rock and roll gave Eric Clapton unimaginable fame. But his private life was an entirely different kind of storm. A dizzying merry-go-round of intense romances, hidden betrayals, and secret children that would quietly lay the groundwork for his eventual, heartbreaking collapse and slow journey toward redemption. Long before he found true peace, His love life was a messy, head-turning headline waiting to happen. In the late 1960s, a young Eric crossed paths with a teenage British aristocrat named Alice Ormsby Gore, the daughter of a wealthy baron. The two quickly plunged into a turbulent on-and-off relationship that was completely weighed down by their heavy, shared addiction to heroin. Though people constantly whispered that they were engaged, Eric's heart was already wandering elsewhere, and by 1974, they officially called it quits so he could chase a different flame. Tragically, Alice would lose her life to an overdose decades later, though she always remained close with his family. That different flame was none other than English model Pattie Boyd, who happened to be married to Eric's close friend and songwriting partner, George Harrison of the Beatles. Eric fell hopelessly and desperately in love with her, a forbidden obsession that inspired some of his greatest music. After a string of mutual affairs, Pattie and George divorced, clearing the way for Eric and Pattie to tie the knot in 1979. But the honeymoon didn't last long, as their marriage quickly soured under the crushing weight of mutual alcoholism and Eric's deeply toxic, abusive behavior. They desperately tried to start a family through fertility treatments, but multiple heartbreaking miscarriages only pushed them further apart. As the marriage fractured, Eric began stepping out on Pattie, launching into numerous high-profile affairs. Two of those secret relationships changed his life forever. In 1984, while still married, he fell for Yvonne Kelly, a studio manager, and together they welcomed a secret daughter named Ruth, whose existence was kept completely hidden from the public for years. Shortly after, he swept an Italian model and actress named Lori Del Santo off her feet. This second affair resulted in the birth of his beloved son, Connor, in 1986, and it was the final straw that drove a heartbroken Pattie to pack her bags and file for divorce. But, as the world would soon learn, these secret double lives were merely a prelude to the ultimate tragedy when young Connor lost his life in that horrific apartment fall. It took years of walking through that fire for Eric to finally find a love that could ground him. In 1998, a clean and sober 53-year-old Eric walked into a party in Ohio and met a 22-year-old administrative assistant named Melia McKinnery. Despite the massive age gap, they sparked a quiet romance, dating in total secrecy for a year before finally introducing their love to the world. They officially married in 2002, and for the first time in his entire chaotic life, Eric remained completely faithful to a partner. Together, they welcomed 3 beautiful daughters, Julie, Ella, and Sophie, creating a tight-knit, blended family that finally gave the restless guitar legend the quiet, loving sanctuary he had spent a lifetime searching for. But long before Eric found this peaceful harbor, his life was repeatedly upended by devastating losses that shook him to his very core. 8 years before meeting Melia, Eric stood on a stage in Wisconsin, completely unaware that a sudden, heartbreaking tragedy was about to claim one of his closest musical brothers. The Funeral Nightmare, Stevie's haunting premonition before the crash. The music world fractured forever on August 27, 1990. On that fateful night, blues legend Stevie Ray Vaughan played his final notes right beside his close friend Eric Clapton. They stood on stage like true brothers in arms, trading fiery guitar riffs that left the crowd completely breathless. But beneath the flashing lights and the happy cheers backstage, a quiet trap was already being set. No one in that room could have guessed that this beautiful celebration of music was actually the final act before an earth-shattering tragedy. A sudden disaster that would leave Clapton carrying a heavy, silent grief for 36 years. The eerie events began just hours before anyone even stepped onto the stage. The day before the show, Stevie shared a chilling secret with his crew. He told them about a terrifying nightmare he just had, where he was standing at his own funeral, looking down at thousands of weeping mourners. It was a bizarre, haunting vision, but in the rush of the tour, everyone brushed it off as a bad dream. Backstage, after the final curtain fell, the energy was electric. The musicians were riding a massive high, laughing and making big plans to fly to London the following year to play a massive tribute concert for Jimi Hendrix. They were looking toward a bright future, totally unaware that the clock was rapidly ticking down on Stevie's life. Eric Clapton was Stevie's biggest fan, and he always watched him in complete awe. For years, Clapton had seen Stevie battle his fierce demons with addiction, and when Stevie finally got sober in 1987, his talent exploded. In Clapton's eyes, Stevie was an open channel where music flowed straight down from heaven. Most guitarists occasionally freeze up on stage or worry about repeating themselves, but Stevie never dried up. His playing that night was so majestic that Clapton later admitted it made him feel intensely insecure about his own skills. He watched from the wings, feeling a mix of deep respect and a strange jealousy that made him want to run away, because he knew there was no one better on the planet. As the night wrapped up, the tour manager walked in with a grim warning. A thick, blinding fog was rolling in, and they needed to move fast to beat the weather. Outside on the dark golf course, 4 helicopters sat waiting to fly everyone to Chicago. This is where a tiny logistical decision changed music history forever. Originally, Stevie's brother Jimmy and his wife were going to take the flight, but due to a sudden last-minute shuffle, there was only one seat left. Eager to get back early, Stevie asked if he could take that final spot. His brother agreed, and Stevie climbed aboard, sitting next to 3 members of Clapton's personal entourage. It was a casual switch made in seconds, but it sealed his fate. The helicopter lifted off into the midnight sky, plunging instantly into a dense, soup-like fog. The pilot at the controls had a dangerous flaw. He was not properly certified to fly a helicopter in low visibility. Blinded by the mist and flying too low, the pilot completely lost his bearings in the dark. Just a half-mile from takeoff, the helicopter banked sharply and slammed violently into the side of a ski slope. The impact killed everyone on board instantly. Because there was no explosion, absolutely no one realized a tragedy had occurred. The other flights arrived safely in Chicago, assuming everyone was asleep in their hotel rooms. Back in Chicago, Clapton's sleep was shattered around 7 in the morning by a frantic pounding on his door. It was his manager, bringing the terrifying news that Stevie's helicopter had never arrived. A short while later, searchers found the wreckage, confirming the worst. In an instant, Clapton's world collapsed. He had to go to the morgue to identify the bodies of his close friend and his loyal crew. The shock left a scar on Clapton's soul that would never heal. The heavy grief broke Clapton with a crushing intensity, mirroring the pain he would feel just 1 year later when his young son tragically passed away. For decades, Clapton wrestled with why such a brilliant musician was taken away right when he had finally cleaned up his life. In his lowest moments, he tried to comfort himself with the thought that maybe Stevie's music had become so perfect that he literally couldn't get any better on this earth. Even though Stevie was gone, his memory fundamentally changed the way Clapton approached the guitar. Inspired by Stevie's final recordings, Clapton began turning his amplifiers down incredibly low, playing so quietly that you could hear the strings sizzling against the frets. It was a complete departure from his loud rock sound, turning his music into something deeply intimate and vulnerable. Through this new, quiet way of playing, Clapton found a unique path toward healing his own broken heart, turning his performances into a living tribute to the fallen brother who had redefined the blues. But the public didn't see the private weight Clapton carried, or the secret history that bound these two men together long before that fateful night. Years after the silence fell over the crash site, the guitar legend finally opened up about the hidden moments that built their unbreakable bond, and the chilling red flags he stayed quiet about just minutes before takeoff. Keep watching to see how a desperate plea for help in a London rehab clinic sparked a brotherhood that would change rock history forever. Eric Clapton breaks his silence on the chilling day. Stevie Ray Vaughan died. Long before the dark clouds rolled over that Wisconsin music festival, Eric Clapton's life was already intertwined with a rare kind of guitar magic that would ultimately leave him with a lifetime of bittersweet memories. The world knows about the terrible crash that stole Stevie Ray Vaughan from us, but few people realize how deeply Eric's personal reflections after the tragedy connect back to the quiet, hidden moments they shared long before that final stage bow. It all started because Eric was actually close friends with Stevie's older brother, Jimmy, first. Back in 1986, Jimmy made a desperate phone call to Eric, asking if he could pop into a London rehab clinic to check on a struggling Stevie, who was trying to get clean. Eric didn't hesitate for a second. He went straight over to show his support, opening up about his own brutal battles with addiction and letting Stevie know he wasn't alone. That intimate meeting in a quiet clinic room forged an instant, unbreakable bond between the two men, setting them on a path to become the closest of friends. Years later, after the nightmare occurred, Eric began to openly share his true thoughts about the sheer brilliance of his fallen brother. He confessed that at the time of the accident, Stevie was easily the greatest electric blues guitar player walking the earth, effortlessly channeling the spirit of his own hero, Albert King. On that final August night at the Alpine Resort, Eric sat tucked away in his dressing room, glued to a tiny monitor screen watching Stevie open the show with his band. He remembered a sudden wave of nerves washing over him, realizing he had to somehow follow an act that was completely untouchable. Stevie's playing was just so incredibly fluid and unique, coming straight from his soul without trying to copy anyone else, and his singing was just as powerful. The magical evening ended with an epic 15-minute jam session of a classic Chicago blues anthem, bringing the whole crowd to its feet. Afterward, the musicians hugged tightly, said their goodbyes, and rushed out toward the waiting helicopters. As Eric climbed inside his own chopper, he noticed a strange, unsettling detail that made his stomach drop. The pilot was frantically using a regular concert t-shirt to wipe away the heavy moisture fogging up the massive glass windshield. Looking out into the darkness, Eric saw a terrifying wall of thick fog hovering just 10 feet off the ground, and he knew in his gut that things weren't right. But he kept his mouth tightly shut, terrified of looking like a panicked flyer. He had absolutely no clue that Stevie had just traded his car keys for a spare seat on one of those very choppers, flying alongside Eric's own close crew members into the dark. Waking up the next morning to the crushing news of the crash, Eric and the surviving musicians gathered in a quiet room, completely heartbroken. They had to make a painful choice, but they quickly agreed that the absolute best way to honor Stevie was to keep the music playing and finish the tour. In his later reflections, Eric couldn't help but compare Stevie's raw devotion to the legendary Jimi Hendrix. He remembered the very first time he ever heard Stevie's guitar work while driving his car, when a new David Bowie song came on the radio. The playing was so completely mind-blowing that Eric literally pulled his car over to the side of the road, utterly stunned, telling himself he had to find out exactly who that guitar player was before the day ended. To Eric, both Hendrix and Stevie shared a rare, beautiful commitment to their art, playing with every single ounce of their soul, every time they picked up their instruments, as if there was no tomorrow. What Stevie Ray Vaughan song is your favorite till this very day? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.